The first model is the classic model. And as I mentioned, these are classic diseases that have been studied since the 1970s, the 1980s, where therapeutic agents will offer symptomatic relief, but rarely offer any true disease modification. These tend to be your IGs, your orals, your treatments that will offer some moderate benefit in terms of control and potentially preventing breakthrough events, but again, are truly rarely disease modifying or curative. If you're launching a new asset within this archetype, the implications are really to focus on the perceived benefit of the product. There tends to be less of a focus on the traditional disease education market development. Rather, the focus is more on accelerating patient identification and ensuring your product has a competitive edge. This product must offer a significant advantage to the current standard therapy and compared to any current SOC as well. It's really imperative to look at access and contracting and price, and ultimately ensuring coverage becomes your critical edge with some of these Me Too or similar products that might only offer an ease of use or convenience benefit. Our second archetype is then our ultra rare orphan therapies. And notice that there is a small overlap with classic. Rules that govern this archetype are generally that there is an exceedingly small patient population, tough to diagnose, with a not well understood disease state. There tends to be only a handful of KOL experts. Implications here are that there tends to be a moderate yet targeted emphasis on disease education and patient identification, but there's also a clear focus on things like clinical trial design itself. How are you capturing objective biomarker measures and then communicating that to select experts in order to continue to help diagnose and identify those patients? There has also been an evolution of disease targeting that greatly impacts this archetype. Oncology is a fantastic example here. These advances have naturally begun to move treatments from those single type broad indications, so things like small cell lung cancer, to narrower, more genetically defined subcategories and substratifications. Prioritizing a launch sequence for these therapeutics that have multiple indications, where several might fall within this orphan and ultra rare designation, is important to consider, as you might be straddling multiple archetypes in addition to ultra rare. Taking a brand that's already been launched in an established state and then launching for ultra rare has been a different pathway than launching a new product itself. But this practice of quote unquote salami slicing comes with its own list of watchouts. The third category we'll cover is the established rare disease therapy. This archetype tends to have a very high prevalence and incidence relative to rare disease, of course, and an established disease state that has a very good understanding amongst providers and key stakeholders, but may or may not have products that are truly disease modifying agents. Diseases that come to mind are things like cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, sickle cell. When launching in this area, it's important to focus on the asset itself and less on traditional market development and traditional disease awareness. It's really important to focus on what truly differentiates this product and makes it imperative to the market and for patient care. Is it an area that doesn't have many notable advances and only symptomatic treatment to date? Or is it an area where we find a lot of different advances and a lot of therapies, for example, something like cystic fibrosis? And how do we truly create an effective launch within this category? The fourth and final archetype is also the most complex archetype, and it's the next generation bucket, where your therapies range from truly disease modifying all the way to curative. Cell and gene therapy in the last decade has reshaped how we classify rare disease agents, along with some of the personalization and genetic components that come with this. These assets often require an assay or a strict diagnostic to determine the exact patient dose, frequency for that individual, but also ensuring adequate time, partners, and framework to establish this process internally is critical within your launch timeframe. Patient access also becomes much more challenging, as a lot of these products tend to have very, very high price tags associated. So, how are you considering things along the reimbursement pathway and coverage? But not only that, also physical access to the product itself and leveraging the centers of excellence model. When you're thinking about things like pricing and innovative contracting models, how are you ensuring that the patient can truly afford the asset, and there is a coverage and reimbursement pathway set up there? There's a strict focus on the clinical trial design itself, not only to satisfy the FDA, but also the payer community and acceptable primary and secondary endpoints to ensure that coverage, and with a focus on collecting ongoing real world evidence. When we're thinking about the treatment center model as well for most of these therapeutic agents, it becomes very, very important to consider how that patient is getting access to that product, how that patient is getting access to that treatment center. There tends to be a very huge focus on mandatory hubs and patient services to ensure that all of these pain points are mitigated.